Good morning and welcome. My name is Heather Nice, and I am the Education Director at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. We've asked Steve James to speak to you today as part of the No Malice Film Contest, a contest created in partnership with the Roger and Chaz Ebert Foundation and the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation to address topics of racial healing. To learn more about the contest, please visit bit.ly/No Malice Film Contest. Before I introduce Steve, I'd like to thank Chaz Ebert for the work she put in to make these sessions possible and play a short video she asked me to share with you.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning and welcome everyone to the third workshop in our No Malice Film Contest series. This is being held during Black History Month and also the month of the birthday of Abraham Lincoln. It's so important for the young people ages 11 to 21 to make films about racial healing, and that's why this contest came about. And we hope that you enjoy the workshop because Steve James he's a good filmmaker and he's also a good teacher. And I'd like to hear more about how he chooses his subjects for his films. And that's what we'll learn today in addition to other things. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you for that great introduction, Chaz. Now, I'd like to introduce Steve James, the expert leading today's session, The People in My Films, Portrayal and Relationships. Steve's previous work includes Academy Award nominated films Hoop Dreams and Abacus, Small Enough to Jail. Other award-winning work includes Stevie, The Interrupters, No Crossover, The Trial of Allen Iverson, and Life Itself. His Starz docuseries, America to Me, was one of the most acclaimed TV shows of 2018. His most recent docuseries, City So Real, premiered to rave reviews on National Geographic and Hulu. As Steve shares his content, please be sure to enter your questions into the Q&A box so we can get to them after he finishes his presentation. If you have any issues hearing or seeing the presentation, please use the chat box to let me know. Steve, it's all yours.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Chaz. Yes, Chaz, I'll get to that question of yours in a bit. But let me first start by just saying, first of all, it's really great to be a part of this this series of workshops, and I think what this whole project is about is really extraordinary and great. So my topic is the people in my films, portrayals and relationships. And I'm hoping that this presentation will be of use to you as you go about making your own films. I think I make what are called character-based films, meaning that much of my filmmaking is focused on the stories of individuals at the base of them. Now, I've always struggled with what to call the people in the films that I make. A common term is to call them subjects, but that's always struck me as something. Subjects are things like math and history, or people that bow down to the king and queen. Characters is another one that people will use. But character seems to kind of connotate fiction to me. Characters in a movie or TV show. So I've landed on people, just even though I don't think it's the greatest description, but I like to call them people in my films, simply because they are people and they're real people, and that's at the heart of what I'm doing here as a filmmaker. And I would say that in documentaries, if we can generalize, we could say that relationships with people in the films on the part of the filmmaker fall into roughly two categories, I would say. There are the people that you will encounter once or maybe twice, but certainly infrequently during the course of your filmmaking process. And then there are the people who, depending on the kind of film you make, if you make films like what I make, that you will build some kind of ongoing relationship with. They would, in fiction, they would be called your protagonists. They would be called your main characters. and they are the main people that you are focusing your film around or centering your film around. So let's talk first about the single encounters, because I think given the projects that many of you are going to be doing, this is something that's going to be very relevant to you as you go about making your film and encountering people that you're going to put in your film. So one of the questions I get a lot is, how do I get people to open up to me? People will say, or viewers will say, the people in your films seem so open and candid. How does that happen? Well, I'm going to get to later, we'll get to the people that you have ongoing relationships with, but starting first with people that you just encounter in the course of your filming, I would say there's a number of things that are important. One is that you be honest. You be honest about what it is you're doing. Now, does that mean you give people a half-hour dissertation on what your film's going to be about? No, that's not very practical. But I think it's always important to be able to find a concise, some people might call it the elevator pitch, way to describe the film that you're making that is also both honest and also enticing, and will make people who you are trying to get to participate or allow you to film to be on board with it. So it's important you be able to articulate that. I think it's really important to be approachable and to be friendly. And even, I dare say, if it's in your repertoire, humor can be a really good way to connect with people that you don't know very well, and put them at ease and make them think that can be fun, can be something that will be different for them and enjoyable for them. And so I try to do all that. I also, in terms of working with people, in working with crew people, I also try to hire people who are also really good with the people that we encounter in the films. I hire crew members who are approachable, who are friendly, and many of them are funny, I have to say. So I think the other thing is you want to be genuinely curious, and letting the person know. You don't necessarily have to say this overtly, but it's all in the way in which you communicate with them, is that you are here to learn. You are here to understand. You don't know it all. That's why you want them to be a part of your film, and to also be willing to let the people in your film sort of take it where it wants to go, and not be bound to your own ideas going into the film. I'll give you a quick anecdote, and then we're going to look at a clip. But some years ago, I was teaching a class at Northwestern, a documentary class, and the students were doing a film about the gentrification of Cabrini Green. And now, for many of you who are young, you probably don't even remember a time when Cabrini Green was not gentrified, but there was a time when it was considered one of the most infamous housing projects in America. And the students were doing a film about gentrification and the impact of that gentrification on the longstanding residents of Cabrini Green. And they went out to do an interview with a woman who had lived there for a long time. And they had heard before they went to do the interview that she had lost a number of people to violence in Cabrini Green. And so they went out with this expectation that they were going to hear her lament all of her loss, and that she would speak very negatively about Cabrini Green because she had lost so many people. They came back from that first interview and they said it didn't go like what we wanted. She talked about how much she loved Cabrini Green, and yes, she talked about her loss, but she doesn't want to move from Cabrini Green. And they were very confused by that. And I said, well, did you did you press her on that? Did you ask her to explain that? And they were like, no, we just didn't know what to do. So they went back and they interviewed her again, and they got the real interview, because then they went back and what they did is that they let her explain her life to them, instead of them trying to get her to fit a certain idea of what they thought she should be. So that was a really important lesson for them. So I'm going to show you a clip from City So Real, a scene, and I want to set it up by saying that in this series, we encounter a lot of people over the course of the filming that we just sort of embraced and put in the film. It was a really fun project, because the whole idea was to hear the voices of the people of Chicago as much as anything. So on this one particular day of shooting, myself and producer partner Zach Piper had been shooting all day, and we were taking an Uber ride back to our cars, because we would tend to travel around during the day by Uber or Lyft. It's actually Lyft, a Lyft driver in this case. And because it was just a lot easier than going back, getting our cars and moving them and parking them and all that. So we were getting a Lyft back to our cars. We got in the car, and the Lyft driver, a woman named Tracy, looked at our camera and she said, what are you guys doing? And so I explained that we were doing this film that was following the mayoral race as a main part of what we were doing. And she immediately started talking about how much she loved this candidate, Amara Enya. And she was so vivacious and interesting. I said to her, Tracy, I didn't know her name then. I just said, do you mind, hold up, would you be interested in being in the film? And she was like, what? I go, and talk about Amara. Talk about why you like Amara Enya as a candidate, because you make a great case for her. And so she was like, okay. So I got in the front seat, and the scene you're going to see is the scene that resulted from that just very simple idea of, I'm going to sit in the front seat and film her talking about what she thinks of Amara Enya, a candidate for mayor. So because I'm a little technically challenged, I'm gonna now share my screen, and we'll start the clip, and I'll be back on the other side of it.
I love her, and I want to be Team Amara, because simple fact that she has a lot to offer, and she's just amazing. And she's gonna win.
Yeah?
Yeah, she's gonna.
So? And what's with this hat you got going here?
Cause my Care Bear onesie, because it's just convenient, and I'm so serious all the time. Sometimes you need to take a day out just to relax, and I love driving. Even though I get paid for it, but like every 30 minutes or so or less, it's like it's a new TV show that gets in my car. And I'm nosy too, so like I like talking to people. They be telling me everything. I try to treat people the way I want to be treated, And it's hard because you meet some, oh my God, I'm getting ready to cry. Because today, when I was picking up this lady, and I wasn't double parked or anything, but this guy pulled up on the side of me and called me a black bitch, stupid black bitch. Bitch. So I'm scared, like out of my mind, scared. And nobody said anything. Nobody like, hey, leave her alone, whatever. And I don't know what it is in the water, but I see like a lot of middle-aged Caucasian men. They be doing stupid stuff. It's like they be, and it's like ever since Trump got into office, everybody just showing like they true colors and everything, and it's like, nobody's born racist. It's taught, and it's really bad. So I didn't mean to cry and like be a party pooper, but how a Care Bear gonna be crying? But it's just, just that's why we need new politicians in office. Because Trump, he's old, he's sour. Pretty much all these politicians, they don't care about nobody but themselves and the Benjamins.
So I think I'm back. Heather will let me know if I'm not.
You are, and we actually had a question come in asking when the film was made. So I thought this would be a good time to ask that.
Sure. We started filming in the summer of 2018, and we filmed through the election in 2019, and then for it's a docuseries, so there were 4 episodes that were made from that, and then we came back for an episode 5 in the wake of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the all of the turmoil and tumult around George Floyd's murder. And so there's an episode 5 that's focused on that time, the time we're essentially living in now, in fact. So, what I love about that scene is that Tracy starts out talking about, she starts out talking about, hang on, I'm getting the next clip ready to go, and I can't do 2 things at once. She starts out talking about Amara, and the conversation turns when I ask her about her Care Bears outfit, because I was just curious, like it was so cute that I just asked her about it. And suddenly, somehow that led to her revealing what had happened to her earlier that day, which was really awful and terrible. What that guy called her, and the what's beeped out there is the N-word that he also called her. And she gets very emotional. And to me, this scene for me is a kind of perfect example of, well, why I love doing documentary, but also what's kind of amazing about people when they feel like you have a genuine interest in who they are and what they have to say. And she clearly, this was on her mind, right? She had been thinking about this probably all day, and we got in the car, and it started very friendly and funny and joyous, but this is really what she wanted to talk about more so than Amara Enya. And she was willing to talk about it candidly with us, which, is, I'm always amazed at with people. I need to get back to my notes here. Let me find them. Where are they? Oh, here they are. Okay. No, that's not them. Sorry. There it is. Okay. So I sorry, technically challenged. What can I say? So there's another kind of single encounter, I think that happens, or again, maybe 2 encounters. And in this case of the clips I'm going to show you, it ended up being 3 encounters, but it started as a single encounter and didn't think it would lead to anything else. There's another kind of single encounter that happens as a result of your relationship with your main person that you're following. And that's key, because if in the case of a film, I'm going to show you a clip from a film called The Interrupters. This is a film in which we went out and we spent a year, about 14 months in the streets of Chicago with these 3 individuals who are called violence interrupters. And they worked for Ceasefire, an organization now called Cure Violence, but it was called Ceasefire back then. And we wanted to follow them around and sort of see the work that they did to try to mediate violent conflicts in the city. And they're all people, the people that work as violence interrupters, and the 3 we followed are all people who at one time would tell you they were part of the problem of violence in the city, in that they were active in gangs, they engaged in criminal behavior. Many of them, if not most of them, had done prison time for these things, and now they were back out in the world and they wanted to make a difference in their communities and help to reduce the violence in their communities. They're genuinely courageous people, some of the most courageous people I've ever encountered in my life, and certainly in my filmmaking. And so a key to this film was building a relationship with the interrupters themselves. And I'm going to get to that kind of thing a little later. But another key thing is, if you build a relationship with your main subjects, that is, you put the time in and you have that level of kind of trust and the kind of relationship that you're looking for with them, it can then extend to other people who are they encounter along the way. So in this case, this is a scene where Kobe Williams, one of the interrupters that we were following for that 14 months, he was going to do a mediation with a guy that he knew that was very angry. And Kobe told us when we met up with him before we walked in, he said, this guy is he's very angry. He's unpredictable. This may not work out. You may not be able to film this. And we said, fine. And that's another important thing. It's like letting your main subjects know that they are in control of these situations. And so our understanding with Kobe and all the interrupters was, if you don't, if it's a situation that is in any way problematic for you and what you're here to do, the film is not important. We will walk away and leave. And so this is the scene that happened as a result of Kobe leading us into a situation where with a guy named Flamo. And I may kill the scene before the end just in the interest of time, but I just want to give you some flavor of this, of this scene. So here it is, coming right up. Oh, no, I pulled up the wrong one. Hold on here. Hold on. Here we go. Okay.
He left me a voicemail.
What up, Dad? I got some important news to talk to you about.
I got a call from a guy I met in jail. He said this guy sent the police into the house. Somehow he is doing illegal things.
Call me back.
Say the police kicked his door in, locked up his brother. They threw handcuffs on his mother. And he talking about he knew who had sent the police in this house. He is looking for him.
I ain't find your bitch ass yesterday, nigga. Man, fuck that pussy ass nigga.
What's up? My man Flamo make you laugh. But if you fuck with him, you better bring it on.
These motherfuckers came here, man. Had my motherfucking mama handcuffed, my little brother handcuffed and shit, man. Took my little brother, one got shot. The fucking wheelchair, man. Took him to jail.
But still, though, man, you got to try to leave that shit alone, though,
I ain't
man.
leaving shit alone until I get these motherfuckers. You already know how I get in.
I mean, but that shit ain't gonna make no...
Boy, it's gonna make it better for me.
I'm sorry to hear about your brother, but still, though, they don't make shit
damn,
no
I need my phone.
They ain't gonna make shit no better, though.
Fuck making it better. I'm walking around my fucking pistol. Can you grab my phone, brother? I can't,
Man, you crazy, man, to be out here like that.
It's love and everything, but I ain't feeling none of this shit. And I respect y'all, you know what I'm saying, what you're doing and everything, that's cool. But fuck that. I'm not with ceasefire. What was y'all letting these motherfuckers can't kick in my door in?
What I'm saying is we can't erase what already happened, but the whole thing is you got to look at it like, man.
You can't erase what happened. You right. And you can't predict what the fuck I'm finna do.
Shit. You know, we just try to work shit out.
You options and solutions to the problem.
Man, fuck this shit. Fuck a problem. Fuck a solution. These motherfuckers trying to take my shit. You ain't just crossing me, you cross my fucking mama. For my mama, nigga, I come in your crib and kill every motherfucker body.
Two of your brother's gone.
Okay. I'm gonna stop it there in the interest of time. um, it goes on, but I think it gives you enough of a sense. So, that's a very intense scene. And when we got there, when Flamo first came out of the house, he said Kobe had told him that he was bringing this film crew with him, and he had been fine with it, but he'd either forgotten or, he was just too beside himself. And he looked at me and he was like, "Who are you?" And so I quickly explained and reminded him that we were with Kobe, and then he was fine and he went on. Now, here's the thing about that scene. Flamo is a guy that, just on the basis of what I showed you, many of you may be making certain assumptions about him and who he is and what he is. I certainly was as a filmmaker in that situation. He in some ways kind of embodies some ideas that people would have of this kind of, gang banging young Black man, who is, what are you going to do with people like this, right? I think that's certainly a feeling that's out there, particularly in the white community, around people like Flamo. Now, had our film just shown that scene of Flamo, it would have been a disservice to who Flamo is. If we had just shown that scene, however, compelling and whatever you want to describe, however you want to describe it, it would have been a disservice to him, because it would have, in many ways, I think, underscored certain stereotypes that people have about the Flamos of the world. So one of the things we were able to do, because Kobe wasn't just someone who would go into someone's life and try to help them in the moment, he would maintain contact with them like any good interrupter social worker. And he made Flamo a project of his to try and help this guy change where the course of his life seemed to be headed, which was back to prison. And so we were able then to film Flamo on 2 other occasions. And I'm going to show you the second scene. I won't show you the third scene in the interest of time, but we were able to film Flamo on 2 other occasions that I think really start to get at something deeper about who this young man is and what he's been through, and hopefully changes the minds of certain viewers about who the Flamos of the world are. So let's go to the next scene now. Hang on, and I'm going to share. Don't you like the way I talk you through all my technical moves? Isn't that great? Okay.
Oh, I want to get stuck in this snow. Where my man at? Where he at? Where he at? Where Flamo? How you doing, sir?
All right, hold on.
Okay. What's up, Flamo? How you feeling today, man?
Blessed,
Man, you all right?
Yeah.
Everything been going for you?
Well, I can't sell drugs right now, so I got to gamble.
Okay.
Man, I just lost.
You talking the Super Bowl?
Yeah, man. I'm a sore loser. I'm ready to get my money back, but it come with the game, man.
I'm just so happy, man, you calmed down, though, man. And, you've been thinking in another way, and that's very good, man.
Man, it's hard. I done stopped doing what I'm doing, but shit, don't push me.
Right.
And you know the good thing? I stopped a little commotion on the block a little while ago.
You stopped something today?
Yeah. As I'm talking to them, I see they want somebody to intervene and stop him and tell him to go his way and he go his way.
You intervened and stopped all that from happening.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about what you did?
Personally, at the time, I just felt like these motherfuckers were making noise and I'm up there watching TV trying to get high. and they made a big ass scene in front of the crib. So shit, I tell them to move on or I'm gonna get in the fucking both of them.
Oh, Flamo, non-violence, non-violence. Yeah, I'm gonna be waiting right here on the side, Rodney. Okay? Oh, what's that in your hand?
Man, it's a blunt, man. I ain't
Hey,
gonna
man,
lie.
but Flamo, man, they ain't had no ride like that. You know, I don't ride with no blunts and shit in here, man.
That's no, man. That's why I ain't tell you, see?
But I'm saying you
I'm
should
about to
have
eat
enough
this.
respect for me. Don't
I
do
know.
that, though. Police pull up, everybody in here can go to jail.
Let me get rid of the evidence.
Yeah, man, that ain't cool at all.
I wasn't thinking.
You weren't thinking?
That's why I'm trying to get into the mode of doing what's right, man. I know I got a little screws missing on the attitude side. I used to want to get in tune with the gangbangs and gunslingers. Like, wasn't none of that worth it. Because out of all the stuff I had to do and done back then, I ain't got nothing to show for it. None that I done negative. My friends in jail, my friends drug addicts or whatever. It seems like, you know how life repeats itself as a cycle. You just be one of the persons that telling the story. I'm trying to be one of the ones telling the story. I don't want to be the one that's living a lifestyle on these streets struggling and, you know, got to keep harm and doing wrong and all this other nonsense.
All right, man, I'm gonna holler at you, bro.
All right, cease fire, brother.
Cease fire.
So the third scene with Flamo is by that point, at the very end of the film, he's gotten a job with the CTA. His life is in a very different place, and he's a much happier guy. And just as an aside, since the film was completed, which was back, we made this film back shot it in 2009. It was released in 2011. Flamo has moved to Minneapolis, and he works in construction. He's also done a little, he's also gone to comedy clubs and done some improv because he is a very funny guy. And he's just in a whole different place. So to me, this is an example of why it's important. And it's different. You know, when you're making fiction, you don't have the same demands. Any good fiction has characters with dimension and complexities, of course, but there's not as much on the line with fiction because you can make a character in fiction what you want them to be, and they may be, you know, highly negative and or they might be fabulous. But in a documentary, these are real people's lives up on the screen, and so I think we owe them more than we do fictional characters in terms of how we portray them in exchange for their courage and letting us portray them. And so in the case of a Flamo, it was vitally important to not just show his angry side, but to show the ways in which he changed. The other thing I get these questions a lot, you know, how does the camera being there change what we get? And I think that scene we just watched is a kind of perfect example of something that I've come to realize, which is that, first of all, it's impossible to answer the question, what would have happened if we weren't there, because we were there. So you can't really answer it. But as filmmakers, we have this sense of when the camera is having an impact and when it's not having as much impact. And I would say that in that very first scene I showed you with Flamo, the camera had an impact in that it amped him up even more in his anger, probably, than it might have if we hadn't been there. And in the second scene, there's something really, for me, personally, very satisfying about it, because down towards the end of that scene, he's saying that he wants to be the guy telling the story. He doesn't want to be one of these guys that the story's told about, meaning that he's dead and gone. And I just remember feeling incredibly moved by that when he said it, and then realizing later that he was saying that for our benefit, that what he articulates there beautifully is not something perhaps that he would have felt a need to articulate to Kobe, because Kobe knows that and understands that. But us as outsiders, me as a white filmmaker in that situation, I think he felt a need to articulate something that he felt we needed to hear and to understand. And thank God for that. And so did the camera change the reality? Probably. Did it make it any less honest? I would argue no. And I think when you think back on the Tracy Lyft driver scene, I think some of that is going on there as well. That there was this opportunity, if I had been a Black filmmaker in that situation, filming her from the front seat of the car, I think her description of what happened to her would no doubt have probably been very different than the way she tells the story to me. Does it make what she told me less valuable? I would say no. I would say that she's really, maybe she is trying to say something she feels people like me need to hear, in a way that she might not have felt she needed to say it that way if it were a Black filmmaker sitting there with her. So this whole issue of who tells stories, I'm happy to get into a little later. I don't want to get too sidetracked with that. But I do think that, I do want to say at this point that it's vitally important for any filmmaker, regardless of your connection to a community or lack of connection, is that you are there to learn and to understand. And I feel like the larger mission of us as documentary filmmakers is to help people who see these films understand who the people are, not sit in judgment. Because the easiest thing in the world to do is to sit in a movie theater, when we can do that again, or sit on your couch at home and watch somebody's life go by in a movie, real life, and sit in judgment of them. Sit there and go, I wouldn't do that, or what do they think they're doing, or why did they say that? And those are all relevant reactions to what people do, because people do stuff that calls into question their judgment. But I think it's vitally important as filmmakers that we are attempting to get you to understand their lives, not make easy judgments about their lives. Okay, I want to move on to the last clip, and then I know there's some questions, and I've kind of ignored the chat box because it's a little hard for me to navigate all this, but I want to get on to the last clip, which is one from life itself, and that features Chaz Ebert. And this clip, is, oops, sorry. I'm just getting myself ready here. There it is. With this clip, this gets us into that part of the story about, or the presentation about how we talk to, how we deal with our main people that we're following, the main subjects or characters, and the building of that relationship. And I haven't forgotten Chaz's question. I'm going to get to that at the very end about how I pick subjects or people. So, you know, this is the most important mission, I think, as a filmmaker we have in the course of the filming, is the kind of relationship we build with our main people that we're focused on, because it reverberates throughout the entire process. What we got with Flamo in every respect, at every point in The Interrupters, would have been impossible had we not built a relationship with Kobe that allowed for that, for him to be willing to do that. Your main people, your main subjects in a film are the ones who really pave the way for your ability to candidly be either accepted or get people to open up, other people to open up and be a part of your story in a hopefully honest and candid way. That relationship is vitally important. And I've found over the years that it happens in different ways that you build that. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it doesn't take as long. But one of the things that I've done over the years is that I've tried to get filming right away with main subjects because I don't want the camera, I want to get past the whole awkwardness of a camera and get them comfortable with me being there and also being there with the camera so that not so they forget the camera, but so that the camera no longer is a big deal. And that can take time. Now in life itself, in the clip I'm going to show, this is an example of a film in which building that relationship was vitally important. It's a profile of Roger Ebert, a biography of Roger Ebert inspired by his amazing memoir called Life Itself. I knew a good title when I saw it. And it features Roger in the film. This is before he passed away. In fact, he passed away during the course of the making of the film. And it also features Chaz, his wife, and a lovely person. And one of the things that we had to deal with was the fact that at the very beginning, which was unexpected, is that he went back into the hospital at the very beginning of the filming with what seemed to be a minor problem, but grew into a much more significant one. And it limited the amount of shooting that I could do with Roger, because even though we were allowed to film in the hospital and then in the rehab facility where he went, it was still limited because, you know, he didn't need us around all the time, nor want us around all the time. And I think certainly Chaz didn't want us around all the time because the goal was for him to get better and not be too distracted from that. So we had to pick and choose how we did that. Now, what that led me to do was to have more of an email relationship with Roger than I ever anticipated going into the film. So that Roger and I communicated by email because that was easy for him, easier. And I decided to make that a feature of the actual film because that's what happened. And I'm a big believer in whatever you think the film you're making is going to be, you make the film that happens in front of you or the story that happens in front of you. And so that's why in this clip, you'll see some back and forth via email with Roger. And then you will see this is a situation where he reveals that it's more serious for him health-wise than he had thought when he went in, and that I knew, and he's revealing that to me. And then that leads to a scene with he and Chaz. And I'll talk a little bit about that more on the back end, but let's look at the scene. And then I promise to wrap up quickly so we can get to questions, because, you know, I tend to ramble. That's just who I am. Okay.
Question 7. Does your father's death hold even greater resonance for you now, given your own medical travails?
There's an inescapable parallel between us. Both my father and I have cancer. My disease may have been started by childhood radiation treatments for an ear infection. I got those because they loved me. In my case, recently discovered tumors of the spine have metastasized.
The doctor said it was these tumors that caused the hip fracture. Roger emailed me that sharing the news of the cancer's return could anger Chaz.
we don't know, we haven't really fully discussed this. It's so new that we really don't know, and I'm uncomfortable talking about it. Just sort of taking it a day at a time like I do everything else.
So, what do the doctors say?
6 to 16 months. It is likely I will have passed when the film is ready.
We'll see. The radiation could do its job so well that he's around a lot longer. So we'll have the radiation, and we'll hope for the best. I mean, here he is in 2013, and in 2006, there were times when they said he wouldn't be here the next day, so.
I have no fear of death. We all die. I consider my remaining days to be like money in the bank. When it is all gone, I will be repossessed. When the pain gets to be unbearable, I may not be so jolly. My senior English teacher asked me, "Ebert, why are you always writing about death?" I think it began in Catholic grade school, where they place so much attention on mortal sin and dying. Found it kind of exciting. I would have been infuriated if I missed this because of an accident or sudden death. This is the third act, and it is an experience.
So you see, little Ebert has always been a macabre sort. Most people probably don't know that about him. Maybe that's why he's jolly. Maybe it's just like, okay.
It makes for a better story.
Oh, that scene gets to me. That was such a remarkable experience to make that film. So that was a situation where clearly he shared this information with me about the cancer. And at the time he shared it, I don't think Chaz knew that he was sharing that with me. That was something it became clear to me at a certain point that there was something more to what was going on, but that I wasn't getting the full story. And then when Roger shared it with me via email, then it all made sense. And that led to this moment where we filmed with the two of them. And they were both only comfortable. The DP, the shooter, the cinematographer on this film, amazing cinematographer, was Dana Cupper, who I've worked with a lot over the years. But this was a situation where it was made clear to me from Roger and Chaz that they would feel most comfortable talking about this if it was just me in the room. And so Zach Piper wired them up for sound, and I took the camera and filmed alone with them in the room. And I do think that made a difference. And for me, this scene, there's so much going on in it. It gets at Roger's sense of story, of life being a story, his life being a story, and wanting to tell it. He asserts in that email about how this isn't just my film, which I love, because I think that's something that's very vitally important for filmmakers to remember, is that this isn't just your film. This film belongs to the people that you're making the film about too, and that they must have agency in that process in real ways, because you owe that to them. And then I love this scene because Chaz and Roger, if it's not clear, when Roger's, that voice for Roger is because he's typing into a program that then translates it into voice. It goes in this unexpected place of humor and in the face of real tragic future. And it's both moving and funny. And it's why I love doing documentary. Okay, I got to wrap up. So quickly, Chaz, your question, and then we'll get to, and I can stay a little longer if people want to go a little past the top of the hour. So because I know I've rambled, but and Heather, you'll triage the questions for me. How do I select subjects? It happens in many different ways. I'm going to keep this short. A lot of times it happens because I have this thing that I want to do. I want to do a film about a certain thing. With Hoop Dreams, I wanted to do a film about what basketball meant to Black young filmmakers, Black young basketball players that harken back to my own experience as a basketball player growing up and having Black teammates that I never really knew their story. And so when we discovered Arthur and then William, they became the main subjects. In other situations, the story is presented to me, and life itself is a perfect example. I was approached by a producer who had read Roger's memoir and said, I think this would make a great documentary. I had not read the memoir. I read the memoir and agreed. And then we went about the process of talking to Roger and Chaz about the prospects of making the film, and it happened. So it happens in different ways, but I think a through line through it is that I'm very interested in the people I'm most fascinated with are people whose lives are inherently interesting themselves. They usually find themselves at a crossroads of some sort, and that their lives have something larger to say about the world we live in. I feel like that's what I gravitate to. And that's probably something you could say about everybody's life. But when I get this sense that this very personal and intimate story can have reverberations in a larger way, I think that's very appealing to me and something that I pull on in terms of the telling of the story. Okay, so sorry.
Oh, you're great. So we had a lot of questions. So to those of you who are participating, just so you know, we are trying to synthesize questions that are similar. So if I don't ask your exact question, I've done my best to make sure that I get to the heart of your question while hopefully being able to combine it with some others, because we have 18 and we don't have time to get to that many. So I think our first question is kind of a simpler, straightforward question. Is there a particular place where you find the inspiration for the subjects that you explore within your films? I know you talked about it a bit kind of throughout the session, but is there anything you'd really like to highlight for that?
I'm sorry, what?
Where you find the inspiration for your subjects in your films?
You mean, in subjects, you mean the topics more than the people?
Probably both, the way that it was asked.
Well, I think a lot of it, again, if it's something I'm originating, it's usually something that I'm intensely curious about. It can also often be something that bothers me. So for instance, with The Interrupters, I noticed that I think a lot of people would read the newspaper on a daily basis, and I would see the violence that was going on in Chicago, and that it became harder and harder to read the articles and easier to just kind of throw your hands up and say, nothing can be done. And I knew that couldn't be the case. So I was inspired to go out, and I read a great article by a good friend of mine, Alex Kotlowitz, that got at it. And so I approached him about turning it into a film. With Hoop Dreams, I mentioned kind of what I think drove me to do that film. With City So Real, the most recent one, I've wanted to do a profile of the city of Chicago for years. But I wanted to find the right moment to do it. I felt like it had to be when Chicago was at a real crossroads. And so with this most recent mayoral election and the trial of Laquan McDonald happening at the same time, it seemed like the perfect time to do it.
So we've had quite a few questions come in related specifically to racial identity, which I think is, obviously a topic for today.
Yes.
Several participants have asked if you have or if you see any ethical questions or concerns when you were shooting films about Black men and women, even
Right.
youth, as you did in Hoop Dreams, when you yourself are not African American.
Yes. No, it is the question of the day. And I've done a lot of thinking about that over the years, but especially in the last year or so, as this issue has become much more front and center. I'll say this. First of all, I've changed my practice. As I've moved forward in my filming in recent years, I've made much more of a commitment to a diverse team of filmmakers than I did in the past. I feel both it's something that I can do, should do, and that's vitally important to the storytelling, to have a diverse team of filmmakers. Now, and so on films like City So Real, America to Me, these films, we had genuine people of color collaborators in significant roles, even directing. And so that's important. And I think it's made for it's not just a duty, it's the right thing to do for the storytelling, as well as the right thing to do for how we change our business. Now, do I look back on the films that I made that weren't with diverse teams and think that and regret them? No, I don't. Do I think they have something to say? I absolutely do. Would they have been different had they been made by filmmakers of color? Absolutely. But I've felt an obligation as a filmmaker that it's important for me to do more than just be a tourist in the communities that I'm making films on. So I make a real commitment to putting myself in that community in a substantial way, because I feel like it's the only way to tell the story, and especially the only way as someone who's not of that community. But the truth is that filmmakers, and I have Black filmmaker friends, while this issue is vitally important that we get more representation of people of color telling their own stories, and I'm mentoring young filmmakers of color now to help tell their own stories when they want that help from me. While that's vitally important, in the grand scheme of things, I know that filmmakers of color also don't want to just tell stories about communities of color, and in fact aren't. Don Porter did a film about a docuseries about Robert Kennedy recently. Roger Ross Williams did Life Animated, which was about a white family, and it's a beautiful film. So, while I in no way want to diminish the absolute need and commitment that needs to be made in this area, I also think in the big picture, we want to get to a place where filmmakers have greater freedom to tell stories, particularly filmmakers of color to tell stories, so that they're not ghettoized into only telling certain kinds of stories, because those are the only kind of stories people will want to see from them.
I think that's great advice. So several of our participants would like to know how they can build trust in communities where maybe the people that they're talking to don't visibly reflect their own truth and their own racial identity, and also how they can help people just feel comfortable talking to a camera.
Yeah, well, I think it's, as I said a moment ago, I think one of the things that's really important is that you put the time in. You can't just wing into a community and expect that you're going to get anything really fully by just being there briefly, no matter what you think you're getting. The more time you spend there, the more you will understand that there's a lot more to any story in any community, in any people. It used to be that you honestly, a white filmmaker could go to the west side of Chicago and get out of a car with a camera and film people on corners or whatever, and no one would say anything to them. That is no longer true, and that's a good thing. If I try to do that and I don't do that, people would be like, "What are you doing? Why are you here? What is this about?" And those are all extremely relevant questions. So it's really important to approach those communities and approach people in an open way, in an honest way, in a candid way, in an empathic way, and build those relationships, because that's how you get it. And that's true whether you are of that community or not. You know, there are plenty of Black filmmakers who didn't grow up on the west side of Chicago. So that experience for them, while it is not nearly as different for them as it is for me, without question, it is still different for them because they didn't grow up in those environments. And so they have to build those relationships too. So I just think, and then I think giving agency to your subjects. I always promise my main subjects, people, that they're going to see the film before it's completed, that I take very seriously what they have to say about it. I want them to be happy about having made this choice to be in the film, however candid and honest the films are. And so it's all about building those relationships, because the more agency people feel they have with you as a filmmaker, and the more trust they have as a result of that, then the more they're willing to share with you.
So I think that kind of gets a bit to the next question, but several of our young filmmakers are wondering if you have any specific advice for how they can show and capture, you know, racial healing and racial unity, but also religious unity and the relationship between diverse individuals within the films they're making.
I think that's a great question. And I think that's what we need. we need films that address that. And I would say that maybe one of the keys is that you try to look in places that the mainstream media are not looking to tell stories. You try to get to people whose voices aren't being heard so much. And when you're with them, you try to dig beyond the headlines. If people are sort of speaking to animosities or angers about things in their lives, those are important to capture, but it's also important to see that that's not all their lives are about. So for instance, in The Interrupters, we have a number of passages in the film where we just really let you sort of see these communities as something way more than just communities where they have a problem with violence, because there is a lot more to those communities. They're not just places, it's not Chirac, okay? People like to call Chicago tough neighborhoods Chirac. And that's, to me, it's an offensive term, because it's trying to equate these communities. I haven't been to Iraq. I'm sure it's probably offensive to Iraqis too. There's probably more going on there, but it's in people's minds, it conjures up a war zone as if, you know, you're in absolute danger by even being there. And that is not true. So I think it's all about digging. The more you dig, the more you approach the people in your films, not to be symbols of ideas, but three-dimensional flesh and blood human beings with contradictions and complexities, then the more you're going to do to, I think, get at some of what you're trying to do in terms of healing.
So this one, maybe I'm thinking it's a deceptively simplistic question, but do you see a documentary more as a news story or more as an expression of art?
No, that's a great question. I definitely don't see it as a news story. It's funny because I think of myself as artistic, but I don't necessarily define myself as an artist. And that's probably because I have certain pretentious ideas about what artists are, to be honest. But I think of myself as a nonfiction storyteller more than anything. And that I'm interested in telling stories, and I want to do it in an artful way. And I want to do it in a way that's compelling and draws you in and makes you laugh and cry and care. And so there's artistry to that, but it's definitely not a news story. I don't think of myself as purely a journalist at all. But I do feel I do have journalist underpinnings and feel certain responsibilities that come with being a journalist.
Perfect. So I divided the questions into some of the more theoretical ones and technical questions. So I'm going to go ahead and jump us into the technical questions because I think if I let them, they would just keep pouring in. So when you showed the first scene with Flamo, we had a participant ask how many cameras you were actually using in that scene at his house.
One. Everything you saw in this film was one camera. All the clips you've seen. In fact, it's rare for me to shoot with two cameras. Generally, the only time I ever shoot with two cameras is if it's some kind of event that it just needs, we need to have two cameras because in order to capture it, like a sporting event, for example. But even most of the sporting events that we've shot over the years, if you've seen America to Me, the wrestling matches downstate were shot with two cameras. I was running around the stands and Kevin Shaw was shooting the main action on the floor. But by and large, 99% of everything in my films is shot one camera. And
for the most part, are you the one shooting them or do you use a cinematographer?
It depends on the film. Lately, I've been shooting a lot. On City So Real, I was shooting. On The Interrupters, I shot. But Hoop Dreams was shot by Peter Gilbert, who's an amazing filmmaker and camera man. And Dana Cupper, I've worked with a lot, who's amazing. So I like to joke that if it really looks nice, I probably didn't shoot it. But in recent years, I've shot more and I've enjoyed it because it allows me to be even more intimate with the crew size. It's good for the budget. And that helps. And I've enjoyed it. I've surprised myself by enjoying it.
So we had some questions come in about the type of camera that you use to film with. And then do you have any tips for our participants in the contest who might actually be using cell phones to film with rather than, technical cameras?
Wow. Well, a lot of times people assume that I shoot with really small cameras because that makes it more intimate. And I'm not saying that might be the case. It's just that over the years, I've tended to always use larger professional cameras, and I don't see it as a hindrance to intimacy. Interrupters was shot with an FS7, or a different Sony. What was it? God, I can't even remember now. An earlier iteration of the FS7. FS7 is what we shot America to Me with. We shot with a Canon C300 on City So Real, and we shot with the Canon, an earlier iteration of the Canon on Ebert. The technology constantly changes. I think one of the beautiful things about the technology now is that it's possible to have a very good camera for a relatively small amount of money. And I think that's great because it's all about just having the ability to go out and film. So I would just say, some people like shooting with a DSLR. I've not really shot with a DSLR, but it can be a very beautiful look with a DSLR, and it also can be an affordable way to go. With shooting with a cell phone, I would recommend anybody shooting with a cell phone is they watch the Steven Soderbergh film, Fly Like a Bird, or so. It's the one about basketball. It's set in the world of professional basketball. It came out a couple of years ago. It's not a documentary, but man, is it beautifully done. And the entire thing is shot with a cell phone. I think if you just Google Steven Soderbergh cell phone shot film, you'll find it. But I think that the challenge with cell phones is that everything is wide and super in focus. And so I would say, unless you want that kind of look for your whole film, you need to move around a lot with it and move in closer, because I don't think you necessarily want to zoom with the screen as much, because the quality of it, you can zoom some, but the quality could be really hurt. So just move the camera a lot. Whereas normally you would zoom, you got to move the camera with a cell phone.
So quite a few of our participants popped in and said it's high flying bird.
High flying bird. There we go.
So one of our participants, Max, would like to know, in a documentary, how do you use techniques like music, camera angles, lighting to enhance the true story that you're trying to tell?
Wow, we'll talk about that for the next hour.
The concise version.
Yeah. Well, music is, let's talk about music for a second. Music I find is really fascinating because I think, I use music in my films a lot. But I try not to use it too much. I tend to think of music as like it's like a drug. And again, depending on how you feel about drugs, a little bit can go a long way. And if you overdo it, it has less impact, let's just say. So I think it's important to think about your scenes as you're making your film and think about what music can do for it and what does it need to do for it and when does it not need to. I have a kind of rule of thumb in my films that really compelling, dramatic stuff, I tend to not put any music to it because I feel like it feels manipulative. And I don't think it's needed. It's not necessary. So that's a bit of a rule of thumb that I have. Again, that's not one that everybody has, but it's one I have. So I think it's about evolving your own philosophy about that. And in City So Real, there's no score. We didn't hire a composer. There's a little bit of score, but it's a 5-hour plus miniseries, and all of the music, 95% of the music in the series is licensed music because I made a decision that I only wanted to use licensed music made in Chicago for this series. And that was a fun sort of bar to set and then figure out how to work with it. With angles and all of that, I tell people, especially if you're shooting stuff single camera, is that if you're shooting real scenes, the important thing is to make sure, no matter how powerful it may be, you're going to probably want to cut it in the edit and trim it and make choices. And so it's important to give yourself what you need in order to do that. And one of the ways I tell people, and then I'll wrap this up, but I tell people is to think about if you're filming a situation where people are having an intense conversation, let's say, there's a tendency when you're filming, if you're inexperienced, is just film the person who's talking. Okay. They're talking, so you film them. And then this person talks, so you film them. And then this person talks, so you film them. Well, the problem with that is that makes it very hard to edit because you can still edit, but you've made it harder for yourself to edit because you never have a cutaway of someone listening that you could use to make changes or trims. But the other problem with it is that you never see how people react to people. And so what I tell people to do is to think about, if you're filming, is think about it as if you weren't filming, how you would take in that situation. If two people were having an intense conversation, you wouldn't just look at the person talking, right? You wouldn't just be like the whole time they're talking, and then when the other person talks, you wouldn't do that. You would be like, how's this person taking this? This person just said something crazy. What's their reaction, or intense or powerful or emotional? So let that guide your decisions in the field, and that will create a situation where you have the kind of coverage that will both allow you to edit it and allow it to be more true to what really went on.
So I'm actually glad you brought up editing because we had a participant, Lauren, ask if you could tell us more about your editing process. As a fellow documentarian, she's really interested in knowing, because she struggles with it, what to keep and what to set to the side.
Well, that's editing, right? It's making those decisions. I tend to shoot a lot on projects. And so there's a lot to wrestle with about what to keep and what to not keep. Generally I will, when I get into the editing, and I edit my films, but mostly don't just do it myself. I have fellow editors because in order to get them done in a reasonable amount of time and to get that input from other talented individuals who can look at your material with a objective eye. So like David Simpson, for example, is someone that I've worked with a lot. And, you know, he and I work in slightly different ways, but fundamentally, we will tend to focus on the scenes that we know are really important to us first. Instead of trying to edit the film, edit scenes that you really feel like are highly likely to end up in your film. Why do that? Well, you know, because that's the best use of your time, but also I find that it takes a while to get into the rhythm of editing and get inspired. And so if you start with scenes that you think are strong, it will get you enthused and get you excited. And then it will also provide a context for scenes that you're not so sure about, as in, I really don't need that. Or, oh, now I see what that scene wants to be in order to support this really strong scene that I have. They say that writing is rewriting. You know, there's a phrase that good writers say, writing is rewriting. Well, filmmaking is re-editing, in my view. And if to the degree that you can afford the time to really spend wrestling with your material, it should just get better and better and better, because you will have more and more ideas that you build on and build on and build on as you go through it, and you'll have your best shot at solving the structural problems that all inevitably crop up.
So this next question is very relevant to the time that we're living in now. Daniel is curious as to how you're navigating filming people in documentaries during a time of social distancing, or if you've been able to.
Well, yeah, episode 5 of City So Real, we ventured out, and we were lucky, but we also tried to be careful. We went out, we wore masks, good masks. We wore gloves, we sanitized frequently, and we kept our distance from subjects. I didn't get up close to people, I zoomed in on them. And we mostly shot outside, which helped. It's, indoors is where it becomes more tricky. And so we made a real conscious effort that we needed to capture what was going on in Chicago, but we needed to do it in a way that was safe for us and safe for people that we were filming. And fortunately, the stories that we were telling in the time of year we were filming, the weather cooperated, but also, it was very much what was going on out in the city. It wasn't an interior story. It was a story of protests, of demonstrations, of people coping with pandemic. And so that lended itself to it. But, there's all kinds of protocols, and you can look them up for ways to film. Some are quite strict. We weren't in a position to be as strict as some people could be, but I think we were extremely careful, and nobody got ill.
I think that's great advice, and such a weird question to ask, right? Like, who thought we'd ever be here?
Well, hopefully it's a temporary question.
Right, absolutely. So we have 2 more questions. So one student's asking, for students who might be doing an animation, which I'm not sure if you have experience with or not, do you have any tips for how they can include emotional scenes like the ones that were in the clips that you shared in those animations and in their films?
In animations?
Yes.
Watch Waltz with Bashir. If you haven't seen that film, it's a masterpiece of animated documentary. And it's based on real interviews and describing it, a very powerful and tragic, and it's just a great film. And there's others. There's shorts out there that are good. I just saw a short recently that was really quite good. Let me find the name of that while we're talking. But I'm not an experienced filmmaker when it comes to animation. I haven't even seen that many animated films. But when I see them and they're really well done, it's an incredible way to go. I'm just trying to find, oh gosh. Hang on.
No worries. We had a question come in about restating the name of the film that you had mentioned, and so I put it in the chat box, but it's Waltz with Bashir.
Yes. I'm just finding, here we go. I will find the name of this short that it's called A Head Shorter by Sasha Bortnick, Bortnik. I don't know how available it is to watch. I have no idea because it was sent to me to watch. It's out, but it was sent to me to watch by someone. But it's about, she interviewed a survivor of the concentration camps from World War II, very old guy, and it's all in his voice, but she animates his story, and it's beautifully, beautifully done. So, I think check out some of these. They will tell you a lot more than I could possibly tell you.
Perfect. That would have been better than anything I could have started with or given them. So that's great to hear. So I know you haven't been paying attention to the chat or the Q&A because I've been doing that for you, but there's
and while I'm thinking of it, could you save and send this to me so that I can look at it after the fact?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been just lots of comments of praise for your presentation, and we have quite a few questions. So I'm kind of merging them into this last question. So they're really interested in knowing about your next project and also how they can see more of your work, because they've, obviously been amazed by what you've shared and they want to see more and know what you've got coming.
Well, I wish I could. So City So Real is available on Hulu. So if you get Hulu, you can get it. It may be available now through, iTunes or whatever. It probably is. Most, if you Google if you go to I don't know, go to IMDb and put my name in, and then you can see the titles. You can I'm sorry, I wish I could just I can't go down the list and go, well, this one's available here and here. But a lot of them are out there. You can see them. You can either find them. They don't tend to be on Netflix these days, although Stevie was on Netflix for a while, which was great. But they're available, iTunes or, other ways. The Interrupters, you can actually watch it through the Frontline, the PBS show website. Although that version is the Frontline version, which is fine, but it's not the theatrical version. But I would just say Google, and you should be able to find stuff to watch.
And then anything about your next project you're working on?
I can't really, I don't tend to share, but I am working on 2 projects that couldn't be more different from each other. And I'm very excited about them. So one of them is I'll just say this, one of them is for ESPN. I did a 30 for 30, so it's going to be another 30 for 30. So if there are 30 for 30 fans out there, maybe you'll see it.
Very cool. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with the participants or anything else you'd like to say?
Just, I would say, go out there and start shooting, right? If you haven't done it yet, just, you don't have to have it all figured out to start a film. You just have to have real curiosity and passion and a desire to get out there, and you will figure it out as you go. I think a lot of documentary filmmaking is, scripted filmmaking is you write a script and then you go make that script. Documentary filmmaking, you're making the script in the field. You're doing it in the field. And even though I'm in a place where I'm able to get funding for the films I make, I frequently, in one of the films that I just recently gotten secured funding for, the way it began is that we went and shot for 3 days with someone because they seemed interesting and I wasn't sure if there was a film there. So I went and spent 3 days with them and came back from that and then edited together some of that material that I used to then go and interest a funder. And that's the way Abacus started too. So, you know, even though I'm, like I say, I'm in a very privileged position of being able to to get support and funding more easily than a lot of filmmakers. I still do it in a lot of times the way you need to do it, which is you just need to go out there, film something, come back, put something together and a proposal, and then start trying to see if you can get people interested in funding your film.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve, for both sharing your experiences with the amazing individuals who you work with in your films, but also just the incredible advice that you're giving our participants. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Healing Illinois, a racial healing initiative of the Illinois Department of Human Services and the Chicago Community Trust. And of course, you, our participants, for spending your Saturday morning with us to learn more about filmmaking. Before you go, I'd like to remind you that we have 2 expert sessions remaining on the next 2 Saturdays at 10 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. Next week, we'll hear from Pamela Sherrod Anderson as she shares Seeds for Story, a session where you'll learn what it takes to go from an idea to a story for the screen, including finding the who and the what to take you where you want to go with your audience. To register for any of the remaining expert sessions, please visit the contest website at bit.ly/No Malice Film Contest. If you missed any of our prior sessions or hopped into today's session a bit late, we're posting recordings there so you can catch up or rewatch for help. Before we end the webinar, please do me a favor by shooting us a chat and telling us where you're watching from and how many people are watching with you. Thank you again for spending your Saturday morning with us, and we hope to see all of you again next weekend.